Now, we're calling it the Jio Bonanza because we believe this is a bonanza for consumers. But what will happen to the industry? Will it bleed itself to death? To debate that and more, we've got a very special panel joining us on India Tonight this evening. It doesn't get bigger than this. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Rajya Sabha MP, and a stalwart really of the industry as well. And he's really batting for the consumer here, joining us live on India Tonight. We've got Rajan Mathews as well, Director General of COAI, and his view is don't write off big GSM. We've got Sanjay Kapoor, former CEO of Airtel, another very senior industry executive who's been leading a company for a very long time, understands the sector very well, and he believes telcos are going to bleed. This is going to be painful for telecom operators, no matter which camp, which side you are in. And we've also got Reiance Chandrasekar, former telecom secretary and president of Nasscom. He feels it's a watershed moment, and more importantly, feels that it will be disruptive in its impact on startups as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking time out and speaking to us on India Tonight, for joining us live on the show this Thursday evening. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, I'm going to start off with you. We all knew that when this happens, it's going to be disruptive. When this happens, it will be a significant game changer. Would you say that today the rules of the game are being rewritten as far as telecom is concerned?
Well, Sandeep, it certainly seems that way. I think we have to be a bit careful about Reliance, and they have a long tradition of announcing big and delivering short of that announcement, especially in the telecom space. So if you ask me, was this announcement designed to disrupt, create fear and create confusion in the mind of in the competitors to Reliance Jio? I suspect that is true, and it has achieved its objective. But there are several questions that still remain to be asked and answered of the Reliance Jio proposition. For example, all of these things that are being offered today, are these essentially to get their network loaded and to create pressure on the regulatory environment to open up the incumbent networks? How is, for example, he going to do free voice calls when there is a termination charge that is due to the terminating networks? Is it something that he is going to absorb and therefore create losses for Reliance Jio? So there are many things, and from my experience with Reliance in the early 2000s, we have to really see how it plays out before we jump to a conclusion. They have had a long track record of big, significant announcements and threatening to alter the dynamics of the business. They fell short the first time around. Let's see what they do this time.
All right, big announcements, but short on delivery. Rajan Mathews, since you represent the big GSM operators here on the show as well this evening, we must ask you this question. As a representative of that lobby, do you believe that you can sit back and think that maybe this is too big an announcement, will fall short on delivery? Or are you somebody who's actually astounded by what has been announced today? Very, very aggressive data plans, very aggressive rollout targets. He was out there in full force. Is big GSM astounded, surprised, shocked with what has been announced?
I think we have been, we as in the incumbent operators, and certainly RIL is also a member of COAI. So let's put it in the right context. Certainly what was announced today was visionary, was certainly going to be very attractive to the consumer, was really rewritten some of the normal ways that one would do pricing and approach the customer. So I think that is all good news and appropriate. But let me say that the incumbent operators have had a track record of introducing and completing one revolution, which is the voice revolution. They are very adept at dealing with the business to consumer end and also with the enterprise. So when this new revolution is brought about vis-a-vis data, please don't underestimate the power of the incumbents to begin to look at these game-changing events and be able to position themselves in an effective way against RIL Jio. So congratulations to RIL Jio. I think they've done a great job in positioning the company. I think the key attributes that they've highlighted are going to be very attractive to the end consumer. But I think the industry is in for some real going ahead, which is going to be a lift for the whole industry. You can't continue to reduce prices and expect that the volumes will not pick up again. So there's going to be some countervailing in terms of the profitability downturn, in terms of being supplanted by volumes. We've seen that on the voice side. We should expect to see this on the data side as well. So good news for the consumer. Incumbent operators don't need to be all that rattled. I think they need to be cautious. They need to be on top of their game. They need to focus on improving their networks, focusing on the consumer, giving value. That's the right way to be able to play along with RelJio in the days ahead.
Don't write off big GSM. I told you that's the take of Rajan Mathews, and I don't expect you to have a different view, Rajan. But Sanjay Kapoor, I know you're going to be more honest. You're not a stakeholder anymore. You're an outsider, so to say, an expert. When you look at what's happened today, the enormity, the scale at which this announcement has been made, and let's for a moment take these announcements at face value. I agree with Rajeev Chandrasekhar. He's made some very valid points there. Promises need to be delivered given the track record. But let's for a moment take these announcements at face value. The sheer magnitude of them, how disruptive is this going to be for the industry?
So Sandeep, up to now, voice as a revenue stream and SMS as a revenue stream was challenged by the OTT players. Now we are seeing a challenger on the access side of things challenging the same revenue streams. The transformational announcements made today were meant to be disruptive, and they are disruptive. I think a few things are going to change permanently for the Indian telecom industry. First and foremost, on a more longer term perspective, India is now going to be using bucketized plans to serve its customers, which means the customer will pay you a price, and that price will have bundled in it data, voice, SMS, and some other goodies. India is also theoretically bidding farewell to voice charges. Well, I'm not clear whether voice is going to be charged as data or voice is not going to be charged as data. If voice is not going to be charged as data, then I'm worried about the arbitrage and the costs associated with it, like Rajeev just spoke about. But if it is going to be charged as data, then again, a permanent change is happening in the market. This also means the burial of calling party pays, because if it's going to be charged as data, then you're going to be charging for the outgoing leg and the incoming leg, which means calling party pays comes to an end. I think other than that, two very emotional, although small ticket items on revenue have been properly touched and tweaked, which is roaming. It is death of roaming in India. And I think that's substantial. And also the death of those black days when operators used to rake in extra moolah by charging special rates or higher rates for SMS during those festive days. So I think it is a big change that has happened. And this change going forward is going to warrant some fundamental changes and some tactical changes. On the fundamental changes, the biggest challenge is going to be to say, if I'm going to be competitive with Reliance going forward, and if 4G is the standard norm that gets established around data, what do I do with 2G and 3G technologies as an incumbent operator? Do I continue with all these technologies, or do I sunset some of these technologies going forward? I think that's going to be a big decision, because it's got a big check associated with it as well. And if somebody decides to sunset a 2G service, then one has to see how the refarming will happen, how the new equipment will come, and how we will then have a program around 4G migration eventually. But on a more shorter term perspective, and going back to 2011, I've seen that no incumbent wants to give up his market share in revenue streams. And my own take is that like what happened in 2011, the operators, the incumbent operators, are not going to give up their revenue stream. So if it means matching the rates in some form, in a packaged manner, in a quasi fashion, I think it'll happen. You will see that it'll not be so easily given away to Reliance, and there'll be a fight that will happen. This would mean the industry will bleed in the short run, and the profitability and the top line might look a little sagged, but so be it, because eventually you need to keep your head up the water. and that's very important. And in an industry which is destined to be an oligopoly, I think the top 2-3 players will give it all out to survive. So I think it's very disruptive. Reliance has struck the right chords. The industry will try to protect itself. In the short run, it's a bleed, but I guess in the long run, this is not a game where the winner takes it all.
Right.
The kitty will be shared between 3-4 top operators. India will get purely consolidated. I'm very worried about the smaller operators. They're going to lose their revenues faster than all of us think. And I think finally the top 2 players will make money and rest of them will scrounge to keep at the edge all the time.
You've said a lot there. What you perhaps haven't said is that for the next 1 or 2 years, it's going to be disruptive and all gloves will be off and on the table. Hold your thoughts there, because I think you touched upon an important voice about voice calls there. And Mr. R Chandrasekar, if I may bring this to you, you're joining us from Nasscom. And I do want to ask you, as somebody who understands the intricacies of the sector, how do you assess the whole promise of a free voice call? The industry is still divided whether it's going to be charged on data or not on data. We still don't have an official word from Reliance AGM on that. But I'm just trying to understand, how do you assess the promise that has been made? It's a tall order, one that is going to change the dynamics of the sector.
You see, I think the first implication one has to understand is that the use of IP technology means that ultimately all the traffic is being reduced to bits and bytes, a stream of a bit stream which is carried on the carriage network. So when you are paying for data, that means that you are actually paying for whatever are the bits and bytes which are being transmitted to you or from you. And in that sense, yes, it's not completely free in terms of the voice data for the which carries the voice being chargeable. But you have to recognize that in today, when you compare, and the TRAI paper on free data also brought out that issue, that there is a huge disproportion between what the cost of data is and the cost of voice. Because historically, telcos have made their revenue on voice. Data in historical sense is a relatively recent arrival on the scene. And there is an imbalance between how data gets charged and how voice gets charged when you look at the equivalent quantum of data which is being transmitted to reach a voice communication to the other end. So in effect, reducing everything to data actually completely changes the rules of the game, and the whole paradigm of providing the service, the basis of charging, and the package for the customer, all of these will change very, very substantially.
Oh yes, the paradigm is going to change. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, how do you expect the big operators to react? They, as someone who's seen this industry evolve over the last couple of decades, they have a lot to protect here. They have a lot to, potentially a lot to lose as well. And it's very clear, given the kind of money that's been pumped in by Jio, over 1 lakh crore rupees, and you get this feeling that with these kind of schemes, they're not worried about losing money. I don't think he's thinking profitability in the near term, at least. How do you see big GSM react? And from a consumer point of view, does it signal that both voice and data tariffs are going to fall substantially? And do you think all GSM operators will also be forced to give voice free?
So Sandeep, I think it's obvious from Rajan Mathews' tone that the GSM operators have learned from today's announcement what they should have been doing for many, many years. It's belated wisdom dawning, but nevertheless it is wisdom dawning. And one of the realities is that the GSM operators have to move to a full IP network. This is something that I have been arguing for several months now in the debate on net neutrality and differential pricing and all of these consultations that the TRA has come out. That the existing operators are trying to hang on to an existing model based on their existing investments, which is a legacy network, and trying to cling on to a model that is going to have to be disrupted and disappear. Now, what has accelerated that process is the arrival of Reliance Jio on the scene. And as Rajan now is happily saying, that call quality will go up, network quality will go up. All of these issues that have been debated and discussed over the last 1 year, and the GSM operators have been fighting a strong rearguard action against any change. So change is going to be forced on them. Change has been forced on them, and primarily it will be around two fundamental points. They will move to becoming full data operators. There is no escaping from that. There was no escaping from that, but the reality is now right down in front of their face. And the second is, it becomes a data-centric tariffing model. There will be no voice calls, there will be none of the other circuit-switched legacy services that we were being charged for. It will all be data on top of data, multiple things. And as a matter of fact, Sandeep, one of the consequences of Reliance Jio coming in and this evolution of the sector is going to be a lot of the debate that we were having on OTT regulation and all of this, lots of considerable amount of time that was spent over the last 1 year will cease to be issues on which the regulator needs to have a view, because it will all become a data-centric world, and these are apps for which operators will then charge data consumption from the consumer.
Important point there, and I did see Rajan not in disagreement there, and Rajan Mathews, urge you to come in on that. The point that Rajeev Chandrasekhar was making, that big GSM will today wake up and realize that a lot of what was being talked about beginning today should have been done prior to today. How would you react to that?
Rajiv's been out of the business, so I can excuse him for not understanding what the major operators have been doing. I think all of the major operators have already IP-fied their core network. All right, they've upgraded, they've brought spectrum, they've invested heavily, they've probably written off a lot of the legacy equipment, and so, yes, there is a substantial amount of voice traffic still there because consumers demand voice traffic. Let me also suggest that in an all data network, you degrade the network when you start offering voice over a data network, because what happens, you prioritize the voice calls on a data network and you cannibalize, in fact, that portion that is to be used for data. So data ends up suffering. So that is why we have in the short term some hybrid movement as we move forward into a 3G, 4G world. Most of our major operators have already established their networks on a 3G, 4G basis, and we're in transition. Obviously, you can't do away with 400-500 million customers who still believe that voice is the fundamental basis on which they interact because of vernacular and other reasons, and because of the entry costs. Those have been brought down, so that will accelerate this process, no doubt about it. But I don't think that we completely agree with Rajeev that the operators have been asleep. We were responsible for that first revolution on the voice side, the changes that came in, multiple competitors coming in at various price points. So we dealt with all of that, and going forward, I think they are well prepared to face hyper competition, to face reduced prices, reduced margins, pump in the investments, take it to the consumer, give the consumer affordability, all that happened through the incumbent operator. So let's continue to watch to see how they respond to RelJio. Certainly game-changing, but certainly something that is going to be good for the consumer, good for the country, good for the industry.
Yeah, I want Sanjay Kapoor to come in on that, because I'm sure he would probably agree with Rajeev Chandrasekhar there when he says that it's a wake-up call for existing large operators. But I also want to place a fact, bring a fact into this discussion, which is that currently we only have 30 million 4G enabled handsets as against 1 billion 2G and 3G enabled handsets. So there's a long way to go for 4G penetration to really kick in. So that point is noted, I understand. But the larger point about this being a wake-up call for existing GSM operators, because Sanjay, you've been pretty vocal about it as well, the quality of service, whether it's voice, whether it's data of existing operators, without naming them, has been pretty poor. And I know partly a lot of it is because of the spectrum crunch, but there hasn't been a sort of a concerted effort, and which is why I'm sensing there must be some amount of nervousness among existing operators now that you have such a disruptive large player, and if he's got a solid network, it's going to be a serious threat to them. Sanjay, you want to comment on that?
Yes, Sandeep, you're probably right over there. If you look at today's announcement, what Reliance Jio has said is, look guys, we've been building this network for the last 4 or 5 years, and we are very confident that you can come use this network free of cost for the next 3 months. If you like it, please stay with us. If you don't like it, please move on. Now that confidence comes because A, they believe they've built a brand new IP data network, but I think this confidence also comes because the benchmark that the incumbent operators on quality and experience that they have left behind is so low that probably Reliance doesn't feel apprehensive of putting in such a challenge in front of them. I think this has come from there. Over the last 2-3 years, the quality of experience on the network has been pretty dismal. And I think everybody's been very vocal, whether it's dropped calls or data sessions or 3G contiguity or 4G contiguity, speeds. I think everything has a question mark. We've debated this earlier. Why is it that China, between 3 operators, spends almost $80 billion per year on the network? Why is it that US, despite of a very mature data network, spends $70 billion? Why is it that a small country like Korea spends $28-29 billion? Japan spends $13-14-15 billion, and we end up spending only $8-10 billion. All the money is going behind the spectrum over the past few years, but very little into improving the consumer experience. Now, data is a non-linear world where 80% of the data gets consumed indoors. What have we really done to take the networks out from an outdoor configuration to an indoor configuration, or to IPIze the whole network, or to build a fiberized backbone? Very little. Even today in India, less than 20% of the sites are connected to fiber. Now, this is a play that you left open for a challenger who wanted to enter the market. We could have said it right, but I think the industry was busy correcting their profitability, which is also very important in the short run. And I think a couple of the companies are listed, and that puts extra pressure on them to say, quarter on quarter, you got to do better. So I think this particular challenge had to be unleashed with Reliance coming in and creating a challenge for everybody in the marketplace. I think everybody will be pushed to up their expenses in the coming years. Otherwise, there'll be a big gap on the delivery of a completely data IP network versus networks which are hybrid networks. So you're right. On your other question on the handsets, my own take is that there's a very close correlation between devices and the infrastructure. Very many times in the past, it is the infrastructure technology that has led and the devices technology has followed. But I think in this day and age, probably it could be interchanged. And my own take is that as the infrastructure technology and the customer experience gathers momentum and there's a visible difference on consumer experience, you will see that the proliferation of devices will undergo a sea change in a very short point in time. So I guess it'll catch up. There's a room, but they will catch up fairly quickly if the customer experience is right going forward.
Right. Hold your thoughts there, because you raised an important point about the industry that was obsessed with profitability or busy with profitability. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, if I may ask you, the question in telecom today for RelJio is not just profitability, but also relevance. And world over, it's important to either roll out your networks very quickly and also have a certain subscriber base to be successful. RelJio doesn't tick the box as far as the second condition is concerned. How soon do you think they can get to where the subscriber base will make their business model viable?
No, and I think that is where they face a significant challenge in getting their interconnect issues sorted out. And I'm actually, as somebody in Parliament, I'm actually a little surprised that the regulator and the government haven't stepped in faster to sort out this very visible, loud, noisy discourse between the incumbent operators and Reliance Jio on the issue of interconnection. Because if they don't settle the interconnection issues with the incumbent operators in a fair, equitable and transparent manner, Reliance Jio will have the issue of being a closed network where consumers can call only within the Reliance Jio network. So the interconnection issue is an important piece that needs to be sorted out. In 1997, 1998, I was a telco, and I remember the fight that the then BSNL, which was the incumbent then, gave to prevent interconnection. Now history is being repeated, and Rajan Mathews and his gang is essentially doing the same thing that BSNL did to them a decade and a half ago or 2 decades ago. So I think that issue needs to be sorted out, and it has to be sorted out quickly, very clearly, cleanly and simply by the regulator stepping in and saying this is the formula, and there is a 1998 interconnect regulation still in place that needs to be updated for the size and scale of the Reliance Jio network that is being launched. So there is that issue before Reliance can talk about how many million subscribers they will load and how many million subscribers they will service. Because if they don't have interconnection, they will have no customers.
Rajan Mathews, I have to come to you because this is a key issue, and we heard Mukesh Ambani also make a pitch saying that he expects the industry to not be to be more pro-competition and to allow these points of interconnection. I know it's become a really thorny issue. You've taken it up with the regulator. Unfortunately, the regulator and the government are shying away from taking a position. Either ways, they just feel that it's a matter for industry to sort between themselves, which I find that I find that quite ridiculous. Actually, the government has to take a view or the regulator has to take a view. I understand your point of view on these prolonged tests that can't go on for eternity, and there has to be clear norms. But the fact is that if you go on denying interconnection, then you will be seen as being anti-competitive.
So Sandeep, I think I agree with Rajeev that clearly this is an area where the government needs to step in, especially when there are two, an incumbent and a new entrant arguing about clarity on policy and rules and regulations. So I think it is appropriate for the government to step in at this point and clarify the issue. However, as you rightly point out, we've never seen this type of quote-unquote a test period. We've been through multiple tests at multiple points, and operators have come in at multiple times into the industry. Nobody has done a trial for 6 months and had upwards of 4 and 5 million customers on that network. So I think the nuances of what is happening needs to be clarified. I believe that if this issue is clarified, the interconnect matter will be resolved once clarity is given to the incumbent operators as well as to Reliance. So I think we need to make sure that the government makes that call, as Rajeev appropriately pointed out.
All right, hold your thoughts there, because Sanjay Kapoor, want you to get into this discussion right away, because I know we've had chats in the past, but now with Mukesh Ambani really taking the fight to big GSM and bringing the matter up into his AGM, first appealing to them, talking about a healthy, rigorous competition, and then reminding them of their legal obligations under license conditions. Where do you see this war go from here? Because like Rajan's position is, it has to be a commercial service and only then will points of interconnection be given. There are charges of revenue erosion already being raised, but the government doesn't want to get into this muddle just yet. Surprisingly so, but it doesn't want to.
Look, at the end of the day, the sharing of infrastructure in an interoperable environment is absolutely paramount. It needs to be done. And the biggest onus lies on the giver and the taker. But the government has the responsibility of providing clarity for a level playing field on the policy. If there's a policy around what is a trial period, what is not a trial period, what is a commercial launch, what is not a commercial launch, needs to be equitable for everybody. It cannot be different for different operators. And I think if that clarity is the only issue which is holding the incumbents from giving away the interconnect and making it interoperable, I think that the government can step in and sort out. The government doesn't need to come in and sort out the interconnects, the physical E-ones to be given. That the two will sort out. But I think government needs to provide that clarity if this is what the incumbents want. I think that much you owe to them for having been, and now that you're going to be using their resources to prop up a challenger who's coming into the market, I think that's the least that they deserve. But I believe that as mature people, because the condition of the networks, as Rajeev said, those were very early days. The number of consumers who would get impacted by BSNL behaving the way they behaved were very, very few. Today, there are zillions of people who are using these services, whose lives depend on the proper functionality of the networks and delivery of data and voice services. So I hope in this petty war, we will not hold those guys to ransom. and we will be justified in providing them the right experience that they deserve.
Right.
And believe you me, the consumer takes very serious note of such like things.
Sure.
And brands can be made and brands can be destroyed if consumers perceive that you are artificially trying to suppress their experience in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
So I hope there be semblance. The consumer will be kept in mind and everybody will do justice, and government will step in if it is only for the clarity of policies.
Fair enough. I know I've really extended my time with all four of you, so I'm going to get closing comments from my panelists here. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, I'm going to start off with you, and let's get the other view. Many believe that Reliance has overcommitted. The fact that he doesn't have subscribers, like we've been saying, 1,10,000 crore rupees of investments is already sunk in. At some point, people are going to talk of return on investment. Do you also believe that there's been a bit of an overcommitment? Is he going to find it really tough to deliver on these promises that has been made in this AGM today?
I think that, given what I just mentioned, that, entering at this stage with a completely new technology and a new platform gives them a lot more options than the other players. Since it is so disruptive and the price points are so radically different, it was necessary, it was probably a business imperative to really present this as such an attractive package that every existing subscriber would be forced or would be tempted at the very least to take a look at this alternative and then make a choice on whether to continue with whatever is already there or to make this transition. But having said that, I would say that the risk factors are not so much. I mean, at least in my perception, the risk factors are not so much in what has been committed in terms of the price and the package. The bigger question is about, number one, the coverage, number two, the quality of service, number three, the reliability, and number four, the security. And all these four dimensions will actually be put to the acid test once commercial services on a large scale are actually being provided.
We're taking quick closing comments from all our panelists here and urge you to be brief there, and I know we've extended our timelines with each one of you. Rajan Mathews, let's begin with you. Do not write off GSM just yet is the word that we started this discussion on. You hold your ground there.
So very clearly, RelJio has raised the bar for everybody. We can see the inception and the beginning of the data revolution, and I'm sure that the incumbent operators are going to play very well and be part of this revolution that was started in the voice side and will continue into the data side, and hopefully we will see the nation prosper as a result of that.
I know the consumer should be smiling. I don't know which operator is going to win this battle, but Sanjay Kapoor, is it RIP Telecom?
Look, this very clearly was an opportune moment to move from voice per minute to ARPU. And I've not seen Reliance lack on that. Their entire strategy is about garnering higher ARPUs. He doesn't want to give anything free, including Wi-Fi. Right? And he's got a sunset for all freebies as of now. So I think he's got intentions to make money. To me, the biggest challenge for him, having picked up a very complex ecosystem of devices, access, storage, content, services, analytics, is I have not seen anybody deliver it to perfection anywhere in the world at first go. So his biggest challenge will be to get the consumer experience right. If he gets that right, he need not worry about the money that he'll make in future. He's bound to make money. But if he doesn't get this right, then obviously the expectations that have been set could be a little on the outside and could be a little tough to meet in the long run.
All right, Rajeev Chandrasekhar, we'll let you have the last word in this discussion then. Does the consumer stay king at the end of this discussion and at the end of whatever has been announced today? Or is the consumer a worried, confused lot with what to do with the choices that are now going to be on display?
No, I think to start with, the consumer required a new operator to come in and shake things up. They've been taken for a ride for a bit too long by the existing ecosystem of operators, and so the introduction of this new competition is a good thing. But having said that, I'm not prepared to award the trophy to Reliance just yet. This is early days. The consumers will decide who comes out ahead. And I don't think the incumbent operators need to worry about imminent death. They just need to get their act together, get fighting fit, and make this a far more competitive business place, in which case, consumers win, the government wins with increased revenue share, and the operators become more nimble and efficient and competitive. So I think this is good overall for the sector and definitely overall for the consumer.
Absolutely, and like you said, you can't lose sight of the fact that who are the incumbent operators? Bharti Airtel, which has been one of the best telecom operators in the world. You got Vodafone, global telecom giant, and Idea backed by the Birla Group. So all three operators surely not short of cash or acumen. So hopefully they'll come back strong. And we're in for interesting times as far as telecom is concerned. It's going to be painful, but like you said, hopefully the consumer will win at the end of it all. Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Mr. Rentala Chandrasekhar, Rajan Mathews and Sanjay Kapoor, thank you so much for joining in with that perspective, really putting it in perspective for our viewers, this big disruption that we've seen in the telecom space. Thanks so much for being with us on ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.